She is Stockton faculty for Communication Studies, as well as the co-founder and director of Stories of Atlantic City. Yes. You already know who I am. I'm going to skip right over that girl in the middle. And thank you. And we have Dr. Christina Morris, who, go ahead, who is an associate professor of communication and genocide studies at Stockton, and also helped to coordinate the intergenerational storytelling project. We have some more friends lined up. I'm actually going to give them a further introduction later, but I want to just tee us up a bit. But before I do, I also want to just give out some special thank yous again to the people who have been running around in the background, Beyonce Tyus and Jacob Wolos. Yep. Stories of AC project managers, and they did a lot in the coordination of this event. We have Michael Cagno and Sarah Lacey of Noise Arts Garage. Brian Gunther from the City of Atlantic City Senior Services Supervisor. Patricia Collins from the Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning at Stockton. And Emily Montgomery and Jillian France, who are former project participants and serving on our panel today. All right, next slide, please. So most of you have been at our events before, but how we usually like to start our presentations is ask our audience, what are your perceptions of Atlantic City? So just throw some words out to me. What's one word that comes to mind when you think of Atlantic City? It could be positive, negative, neutral. The beach, water, boardwalk, casinos. Okay. Community, that's a great one. One of a kind. All right, so saltwater taffy. So those are actually all great responses. But typically, for people who are not from this community, we hear all types of responses. And we know that has a lot to do with what's placed in the media, right? So next slide. So many times when people think of Atlantic City, this is what they think of. We have these melancholy pictures, there's dark, it's dreary. These pictures are actually from an article that came out during the pandemic from Politico, and the article was titled, "A City Without a Pulse." And so we work really hard to change this narrative. We know that media is a powerful tool. And so what we do here at Stories of Atlantic City is work to change the perception that people have of Atlantic City, because the people that know Atlantic City, the people that live here, the people that work here know it best. And we know it's not all of what the media says it is to be. Next slide. So for those of us who are actually in Atlantic City, this is what we know. It's a vibrant city full of rich history. It's full of artists, activists, educators, entrepreneurs, promising youth. It has a beautiful shore, which I heard earlier. There's some really amazing organizations that are doing the work, and the list goes on. So again, we can see how powerful the media is, and even just this change in the color can show you the vibrancy compared to what is often portrayed of the city. So a little bit about what this project is. Next slide, please. Stories of Atlantic City is a collaborative project focused on telling restorative stories and untold stories of the city and its people. We work on stories and information sharing that inspires hope, change, and highlights experiences of resilience despite challenges. Because we're not saying that there's no challenges, right? But we know that that's not the only narrative that should be painted here in Atlantic City. And every city has its challenges. So we focus on three main things, and that is a traditional and hyperlocal media collaboration. So we work alongside other media partners to create beautiful stories. We also work with community members to be able to tell their own stories about their community. We are a community organizer, so one of our events, we throw events, we do workshops, we do trainings, and we also serve as an educational resource. Of course, we're under the umbrella of Stockton, so that benefits us in a lot of ways. We get to educate students, we offer internships, and we often do a lot of service learning, so pairing students from Stockton with different organizations in the city. So now that we have that foundation, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Morris, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Intergenerational Storytelling Project, how it came to be, and how we are here today.
Oh, should I stay seated?
Sorry.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Hi, everybody. So many of you have been part of the project so far, and it has, well, the way that the project came to us, if I remember correctly, Professor Rosenthal and I happened to be on a walk together down the boardwalk during COVID because we couldn't meet in a coffee shop, and we like to talk about our school ideas. So we were on a walk thinking, how can we make this coming semester something that would be really like special for the students, since they're going to have to be sitting home and looking at their computer. And we wanted to, since we, Stories of AC was just sort of starting to blossom when the pandemic came. So it was like it was truncated, right? It was like cut off. So we're like, okay, what can we do? What can we do? And Christina Noble had just sort of come on board, and the three of us rubbed our heads together and came up with this idea that we thought would be beneficial to our students as well as our community members, because we knew that in that time of COVID, people were feeling very isolated, right? And we, even though many of our older community members maybe didn't have all the tech savviness at the beginning, we made sure that everybody had what they needed to record their interviews. It was this incredible moment of connection between us and the students, the community, right? And I would have to say, like, one of the things that I didn't realize, but that actually became one of my favorite sort of talking points about it, I don't think I realized how much the students would find such meaning from talking to the elders about their memories and their own experiences during the civil rights period. And it made me realize that my other field besides communication is genocide studies, Holocaust and genocide, and I made the link between when we get to hear a Holocaust survivor speak, and how that really impacts us. And it was very similar when the students got to hear our older community members talk about their own experiences. I feel like they were touched and moved and surprised in ways that reading even the best book would never have sort of allowed for. So it went so beautifully. The first semester we thought, oh gosh, we're going to keep it going and see if we can get more stories, right, and hear from more people. So we now have 3 semesters of stories banked from our wonderful participants. And today we are going to share a little bit about the process with you. Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. Some of our lovely photos from the beautiful Nastasia Davis, who's right from the community.
I was going to say that she captures the soul of her subject like nobody I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Really incredible.
We'll show some more pictures later, too. I was definitely going to shout you out, girl.
So during the pandemic, with the trust of health and safety, if you notice, too, a lot of these pictures are on front porches or through doorways, honoring that space as well.
Right.
What a beautiful thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Next slide, please. So some of the impacts that this project had on the perceptions of Atlantic City. So as I said, at Stories of Atlantic City, we work really hard to shift the narrative of what's often portrayed. And we do that in quite a few ways, but I think the beautiful thing about this project is that we were able to pair students directly with seniors who lived in the community. And so we had this interesting crossing of formal education, so they were learning about things that happened in history in the classroom, and then we paired it with like an oral tradition, so now they're speaking to people in the community, people who lived through this time frame which they're learning about, and then we also made it very place specific, so now you're listening to the people who experienced these experiences in Atlantic City while it was happening, and so I think it really just broadened the horizons of the students, and it changed their perception of Atlantic City itself. They got to talk to real people. Many of the students at Stockton are not from this area, so they too come in sometimes with their own perceptions, but being able to sit down and talk to community members really helped to broaden their horizons and to shift their perspectives of the city. So go back for a second, please. There we go. So these are just some cool stats of the intergenerational project by the numbers. So over time, we have had about 20 elders that we engaged with for this project in all of our rounds, over 70 students who engaged in this project. Hundreds of participants joined our events. We had Zoom events when we first started, and we had a really good turnout each time. There was such interest in this project. And even when we started doing them in person, people still were coming out, and that was amazing. We did about 5 rounds of the project. 5 national and international presentations. This project really gained a lot of respect and a lot of interest from all over the world. We did presentation for a group in Amsterdam, Generations United, which is a national organization, WHYY. So it just shows you how impactful a project like this can be. And we also covered various topic discussions. So we talked about everything from Black Lives Matter to food security in Atlantic City, social and civil rights, and more. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the process. And it was a process because, as Dr. Morris said, when we started this process, it was at the beginning of the pandemic, so we were all socially distanced. We were also in the midst of a social uprising and unrest, and we had to work through all of those details and make sure that we were very careful in how we approached such a sensitive subject matter and a sensitive time in our nation generally. We really had to focus on building trust between faculty and partner organizations, as well as Stockton community and Atlantic City community. And even as a person of color myself, sometimes there's a mistrust and a distrust in larger institutions, right? And so we really dedicated a lot of time to making sure that the people that we engaged with trusted us enough to care for their stories, hold their stories, and then share their stories. And the students also had to build trust. We have students who were coming from all different walks of life, so we had to make sure that they were comfortable enough to be able to do these interviews, and so that took some time to build. Next slide. So then, once we started the process, we recognized that there were some challenges, but also some opportunities. So we're talking about an intergenerational project. So of course, while we're socially distanced, technology was a thing. How do we make this work for an older generation who doesn't typically, may not typically be on devices like our younger generation? And how do we get them to be able to interview while we're far apart? How do we make sure that everyone's comfortable with technology? And that was a process in itself. So, we had the support from Stockton, from Stories of Atlantic City. We were able to get devices out to people. We were able to get hotspots out to people and build trust enough to be able to deliver them to people's doors, for people to allow us in their homes to set it up. And just seeing how those relationships unfolded was also really a beautiful thing. And that interaction itself was also an intergenerational happening, having a younger generation teach an older generation how to use technology, right? Something we thought was so simple, but it really wasn't. But all of our seniors were really just amenable to working alongside of us. And it really turned out to be an amazing project because of that. Next slide. And so this is a journey. You see some pictures from when we started virtually and then ended up transitioning into our in-person sessions. And the interest was there throughout, and it really was just beautiful happenings throughout. Being able to see the students as well when we were able to come out of our homes and they get to see their elders in person. It was just so many amazing moments that happened. And so such an organic relationship that happened. It's been really impactful on the community, on the students, and on all the other participants. Did you want to add anything, Toby or Dr. Morris, about this process? I'm talking from community organizer side, but they're talking from academic side and what that looked like.
Just that it was a really enlightening and enriching experience, and I got to say that I felt so honored that all of you were willing to give us your time and trust us with your stories. And I hope that we've made you proud, like that we've done something that makes you happy with what we've done.
Next slide. So we captured some of the students' thoughts about this project. Just wanted to read some of these. The elders taught me a lot about Atlantic City's history and the people who live in it. I have a totally different perspective on AC, and I wish everyone could have the experience that I had. Atlantic City has a rich, amazing history, and it is the root of so much innovation and social triumph. It has overcome a lot and has become stronger in the process. Next slide. Because of this experience, I feel so connected to the AC community because the stories we heard remind us of how amazing the people of Atlantic City are. And lastly, it was fascinating getting to know the elders and hearing their stories and how similar the past is to today. Racial injustice is still prevalent. The civil rights movement took place to gain equal rights for Black people. The Black Lives Matter movement is standing for the same today. So you can see just how poignant some of these quotes are. These experiences really stuck with the students. And even myself, I learned more during this project than I learned in any book growing up in Egg Harbor Township. And so this is why projects like these are so important, why it's so important to make that connection between what you're reading in the book and real life. Next slide. So I just wanted to share a brief video. This is one of the students from Dr. Morris's class and one of the first rounds of this project. And the funny thing is, I was going to say, go ahead.
A student who, I'd had him in 2 classes. I don't think he'd ever spoken a word, and I don't even think I knew what his voice sounded like. So I was not expecting big things from Tariq.
So you can play the video, please.
As you can see that we were able to interview 2 elders that lived through very, very, very important times in the movement of equality as a whole. And I think that plays a big part in really looking into their perspective on the future for us. You know, because they lived in a time where it was definitely way more, I could say, tension, you know, but now it's kind of a little different. But you can see through Mr. Jordan and Mr. Jordan that they experience things of racism that a lot of us can't really attest to right now. So for them to be able to say that they're optimistic and through prayer, they feel like things can change. And they feel optimistic because of people my age that are in their 20s, that are millennials, that when Mr. Jordan told us that he felt like he saw change in our future because people our age are able to come together better. And because we've been around people that are different colors than us and different ethnicities, and that plays a big part in definitely how we're gonna go about changing things that are gonna come about once, you know, we aren't able to look back on things, because in the moment you really don't see those things. And Mr. Jordan really put things in perspective for me, because for him to say that, I should be able to say the same thing. So I feel like that was a really big part of it. And he even brought up so many things that we went over in class. Like he brought up Stokely Carmichael, he brought up Dr. King, you know, all things in the 1964 convention. You know, we spoke about that in class. So it was kind of cool to see and have somebody tap into that memory and really tell us his experiences and things that he saw and things like that. So that was pretty cool.
So thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Jordan, for waking up Tariq, because he was incredible.
Yes, and I think it says a lot too, just about representation, how much that matters. Dr. Morris said there's a student who's been in this class who barely talked the entire class, read everything in the books, knew about the history, but finally got to talk to someone who looked like him, and look how much he opened up and blossomed. So thank you again to the Jordans. You may have to click a few times back there. We have some more photos on this.
Other pictures are just beautiful.
Can we click a few times in the back?
Next slide.
There we go. There we go. So these are not all of the elders, but this is quite a few of our elders who participated in our projects throughout the year. Many of you who are here today with us. So again,
It's cut off, but she's right there.
yes. And so again, I was going to do my shout out to Nastasia because she took all of these beautiful photos. Yes. And this is just another testament to community coming together. Next slide. I have one more clip I want to show you, and then we're going to jump into our panel. And this is just some reflections from some of our elders and how they felt about this project.
they know more than you think they know. It's just that you don't want to give up your seat of privilege at the table to the young people. The young people have been integrated, meaning that you have been going to school with black people for many, many years. Young people have been hip-hop, meaning that you've been affected by the hip-hop culture. So the hip-hoppers are bragging and rapping about their experiences with the police, their experiences with racists and racism. And you hear this, and I'll tell you, millennials are used to being around black people. Millennials, because of the way it is today, might have some black people as their best friends. So millennials are starting to move up. It's the older people. It's the 170s or 80s that set it down.
Song of my heart. And that is that Black Lives Matter is the most powerful thing that's happened. And I'm delighted I lived long enough to see it. This is for real this time. These black kids, white America, really understand the injustices that does to people of color. And they feel as though that I feel as though that this movement is going to really, really take root.
So just some of the few reflections that we receive from our elders. Yes, and so we're going to actually introduce some of them right now. Some of the folks you saw in the video are at our table now, but you can see that it impacted the elders just as much as it did our student participants. So first we have Mr. Ralph Hunter up here to join us. Mr. Hunter is originally from Philadelphia, but he calls Atlantic City his home. After a long career in retail, in 2002, Mr. Hunter founded Atlantic City's African American Heritage Museum, which is right at the back of this hall, which includes a vast collection of paintings, ceramics, and advertising and branding memorabilia that serve to start the larger conversation about the true African American experience. Next, we have Ms. Valeria Marcus. Ms. Marcus was born and raised in Atlantic City, and although she's lived in other cities, she always returned home. Ms. Marcus is an artist specializing in oil canvas painting, and she is also a child abuse and domestic violence advocate and uses her platform to educate people on the subject whenever possible. Lastly, from our elder participants, we have Mr. Michael Lovejoy Stafford. Originally from California by the way of Vicksburg, Mississippi, Mr. Stafford called his move from the Deep South an epiphany. Mr. Stafford now considers Atlantic City his home, and he has worked in the Atlantic City School District for over the past 15 years. Next slide, let's talk about our student participants here. First, we have Miss Malika Stafford. If you couldn't tell by her cheesing while her dad was talking earlier, that's her dad. Malika was formerly a Stories of Atlantic City intern working closely with this project. She is currently a Stockton graduate, having majored in communication studies and minored in Africana studies, and she attends New York University as a graduate student. And yeah. Next, we have Emily Montgomery, and Emily was a student interviewer for the project in fall 2020 and served as the class liaison and project documentarian for the project in spring 2021. She's also a Stockton University graduate and formerly a multimedia content producer for Stories of Atlantic City. She now works for a youth nonprofit organization based in Atlantic City called Mighty Writers. And then we have, last but not least, Miss Madison McDaniel, who also was a participant in this project and is a Stockton graduate as well. Let's jump into some of these questions. Next slide, you can keep it right there. So, We're going to start with Madison. So some of these questions will be based on their general experience with this project. Some is going to be very specific to what they talked about during their round of the project. So start with you, Madison. Many of your classmates expressed nervousness going into their interviews with AC Elders, but then later expressed help being at ease once they began speaking with the interviewee. What sort of feelings did you have when beginning this project, and were you nervous at all? Why or why not?
I was very nervous, definitely starting out. I grew up very privileged, where I grew up. I had very different views about Atlantic City. I didn't grow up here. I didn't go there very often to the beaches or on the boardwalk or anything like that. So I didn't know what to expect going into it. But after the fact now, it was truly an invaluable experience. I'm so happy. There was so much I learned. The people of Atlantic City are so strong. They're so friendly. And after I graduated from Stockton, I had the opportunity to live in Absecon for about a year after. So, 10 minutes away from Atlantic City. I was there all the time, going in there, really getting to experience the things that I talked about in my interview. And I realized there was really nothing to be nervous about, whatsoever. I got to interview with Taria. I know she couldn't be here today, but she was a sweetheart. And some of the things that I learned from her and heard her talk about, she's such a strong woman. And I hope I get the chance to speak with her again someday soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're going to jump to Mr. Hunter. So, Mr. Hunter, in what ways did working with the students surprise you? And did you notice any stark generational differences?
No, I thought it was a great opportunity to work with the Stockton students. It was just a host of young people really interested in what took place here in Atlantic City and how Atlantic City got started, how people of color had the opportunity to own and operate their own businesses and their doctors and lawyers. It was just incredible just to see the humiliation on the face of those students. It was really, really a great opportunity for me to learn from them. When an old head like me has an opportunity to sit back and listen to the youngins, it's fantastic. And I really, truly enjoyed meeting you, of course, and spending time with you. And your ability to talk to people was just amazing. You're really a hero, and you're going to go down in my history book as really one of the great ones that came out of Stockton University. Outstanding work.
Well, it's beautiful.
Did I answer your question?
It sure did. So let's jump to you, Emily, because you actually were involved in this project on multiple occasions in different capacities, right? So why did you return to this project, and how has working on this project impacted or changed you?
Why did I return to the project? Well, as a student, I had a totally different experience, obviously, like interviewing everyone. And then when I returned, I was actually like putting together the interviews that other students completed. So I actually liked that better because I got to see everyone's interviews and not just like the few interviews that me and my group did when I was a student. So I guess like that's the reason I would say I returned, is because I like wanted more. So what was your second part of the question? I forgot.
How has it impacted you or changed you?
How has it impacted me? Well, I like went into school like always thinking like I wanted to be in broadcast news. And then I did storytelling like this on a more like positive perspective rather than like the typical doom and gloom you see on TV. And it just like made me like crave that kind of storytelling, that like restorative narrative, that focus on like community. Because I think like every place has a story, every person has a story. And yeah, those are the things that I want to shed light on. Those are the stories that I want to hear. So yeah, that's I guess how it impacted me. It impacted my career and my direction.
It sure did. Now you're back in Atlantic City doing
Yes.
social justice work.
Yes,
And working
and I
with
couldn't be
Atlantic
happier
City.
with what I'm doing now, so yeah.
These are the experiences that matter, y'all.
Yes,
You don't
for
know until
sure.
you know. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing.
of course.
So I'm going to jump to Mrs. Valeria Marcus. So I'm going to ask you specifically about some of the things that you talked about in one of your interviews. So during one of your interviews, you shared that your experience growing up as a multiracial woman was somewhat difficult. You discussed a few times in which you experienced the effects of colorism. So it could have not been easy, growing up experiencing something as alienating as colorism. So can you share with us what that was like a bit?
All right.
growing up in the neighborhood, my sister and I, the kids didn't want to play with us at all because of our skin color, and I'm the darkest one in my family, and they used to call us Whitey. And my parents didn't talk about color at all. We didn't know what Whitey meant. So we had to ask the question, why they keep, they're not playing with us, and what does it mean? Also in school, elementary school, Indiana Avenue School, the kids wouldn't eat with us at the lunch table. So I had to sit by myself, like I didn't matter or I didn't belong, and it's very lonely. So later I asked my mother to let me come home for lunch sometime or give me some money to go get a sub once a week, so she did. And when we used to go on the playground in the neighborhood, kids would not come play with us at all, like I said, and we tried to join them, they would leave immediately because we're like the Martians, or it's because the way we look. And it didn't help because I was born with blonde hair, curly hair, blonde red hair, so I was the only one in the neighborhood with blonde hair, like my mother had blonde hair when she was growing up, and my grandfather. So I was teased because of that. And I didn't like my hair color, didn't turn red. I was so happy when it started turning darker when I was later in life. And again, no one played with us in the neighborhood because of the way we looked. And my parents didn't have any friends either, and sometimes they didn't even speak to us. And it was so bad, my mother wanted to send us to Catholic school. And we were Christian, Baptists, and they told us, well, back then, we had to convert to Catholicism to go to the school, so that was out. Then my parents tried to move to a mixed neighborhood. My father didn't want to do it. It was that bad that she wanted us out the environment, and the kids would pick on us. I never got in a fight because I always used my mouth, so I was able to use my mouth and get the kids back off me, and I did. And also the kids were cruel, just because the way we looked. My father was bilingual, and that didn't help either. And the kids, they learned that from home. They had to learn it from home. You're that young to talk about somebody's skin color and your father, this and that. Like I said, again, we knew nothing about race, color, because we mixed with everyone with that background. And we were like, it was foreign to us. And so what, my father spoke Spanish. We didn't have nothing to do with that. It was lonely. It wasn't a good feeling at all. It was wrong to alienate people in the neighborhood just because of the way they look and the way they act. And it goes on today also. And I went to black college for 1 year. I didn't fit in. I had to leave. And then I went to Moore, and I fit in. And there was not many black and Spanish people there, but I was in my element. That's because of art. It's just I fit in with more with the white students. So that's my feeling on that. And today, even being at this age, you still get treated sometime negatively just because. And you are who you are. You don't make yourself. And I think people should be raised differently in the home. Black, white, Asian, whatever you are. And to accept people for what they are and how they look. So what, they speak another language. So what, this and that. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's how you treat people kindly and accept them as they are. And like today, my sister and I, we still get some flack. And we old, we still getting some flack. Unbelievable, because some people never change. And we were alienated a little bit in the church too in the beginning, but then it was later because other people came to the church, Union Baptist, that looked like us. They were mixed too. So it got a little better. So did I answer the question?
It sure did. Thank you. So, yes. Well, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that story, because again, I'm sure that was a harrowing experience growing up. And like you said, it still affects you today. But I think how we can begin to tackle these issues is education, right? And this is what this project is about. And so I called Julian up here because she was actually one of the students that interviewed Ms. Marcus. And so I just wanted to share just how powerful story sharing can be, and how Ms. Valeria sharing her stories with Julian made an impact on her. So if you just wanted to share a few words.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I met Ms. Marcus in spring of 2021, and I was in the group that had the privilege of interviewing her. And just like you heard her speaking, you know, it's not easy to share stories like that. It's very vulnerable, and I just was so grateful that she opened up to me and the other students about just her experiences growing up in Atlantic City. I remember she shared with me one story relating to how colorism was prevalent when she was in high school. I think you graduated in 72, right, Ms. Marcus? Yeah, so 1968 to 72 at AC High, she was telling me how people who had darker skin were not placed in the honor classes, and that the teachers you know, we're picking and choosing who would be in college prep classes. And that story just really stuck with me because, you know, we learned about all this stuff in Dr. Morris's course, but like she said, you could read the best book and it still just hits a lot deeper when you're hearing it from someone who lived and experienced it.
Yeah, I was placed in college prep, and I was privileged to major in art. I was the only minority of a class over 200 people. And our art major for that year, Art 1, 2, and 3, Mrs. Gerard, I think it was 7 and 8 of us. And again, I was the only minority, and I wasn't the only one who could draw. I mean, I had the talent since I was 4 years old, but that was unusual for someone of color to major in art. And it was wrong, because I know other children should have been in the class too. And I found out later, I'm gonna say this, 10 years ago, some guidance counselors told African American and Spanish kids that they weren't college material, and I didn't know they were doing that. I never got that, you know, never said it to me, okay? And I was upset that some guidance counselors were saying that too. They should have been reported and probably terminated. And a lot of people who they said it to, some of my relatives and friends, they went on to get a degree. One of my friends, she got a PhD. She's one of the smartest people I know from kindergarten. So it's a lot of things that kids need to speak up on that's not right. And like I said, I just found that out 10 years ago that some guidance counselors were doing that. That was so, that's racist.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say that any kind of way. And you can't even get around that.
Right.
Who does that?
I mean, and unfortunately, that's still a trend that happens today. So this is why education is so important, representation is so important, and projects like these are so important. And since we're on education, I want to throw a question to Mr. Stafford. One of the recurring topics that arose during our project was the lapse in formal education surrounding important Black history. As a longtime employee of the school district and as an advocate for education, can you share your thoughts on the current state of the educational system and talk about some of the disparities and miseducation?
Well, I just want to chime in on what that sister just said in reference to how, excuse me, the students are guided away from their dreams, because the same thing happened to me. In college, pre-med, I go to my counselor and he tells me, your background doesn't give you the qualifications to be a doctor. Why don't you just be a carpenter? Blew my mind. So I spun out of that, and I became one who fought against the system. I was an advocate of the Black Panthers, advocate of the Black Muslims, the Black guerrilla family, all of that in Oakland, California. The same thing happened to Malcolm X.
Malcolm, what do you want to be? I want to be a lawyer. Oh, Malcolm, your people won't come and participate with you. Why don't you just be a janitor or something? The same thing happened to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He wanted to be a doctor. Oh, Louis, why don't you just play your violin and let that be it? So you gotta know what the stakes are. The state of the educational system at this time, that little misguiding or guiding someone away from their dreams is one of the reasons why our community is struggling and suffering the way it is. Because those people who say they're there to guide you, they're your actual enemies. They hate your guts. I work in the school system. I work in the hospital too. And the same thing that happens when a young black girl goes to have her baby, the nurse comes and tells her, you know, you got to give your son that shot. I'm not talking about the COVID shot. I'm talking about the MMR shot, measles, mumps, rubella. And it just came out about 4 years ago. The CDC, Dr. William Thompson, blew the whistle that every time he sees a child with autism, he said he feels responsible because he was one of the ones that covered up the information that said that black boys suffer 200% more autism than anyone else. And the thing that brought it all together, it was the MMR shot. So education, brothers and sisters, is very, very key. For my children, and you know, we debate about this all the time, Malika and I, about education. The education, brothers and sisters, is something that you have to really, really take serious because your children learn what they learn. They spend 7 hours a day for 12 years in these classrooms with these teachers. And the teachers are not giving them what they need. They're teaching them something other than do for self, meaning that you got to learn how to build for yourself, you got to educate your own, you have to hire your own, you have to do for self. But the education does not teach your children that. And so what you see is the fallout of the failure to educate, the failure to protect, and the failure to give them the basics of what they need. And the basics is to teach your own and have your own. Because you can't look to nobody else to give you what you need. You got to do this for yourself.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that. I know, right? He's always spitting gems, right? Unfortunately, education isn't always equal and it isn't always equitable. And that was a topic that came up often. We had quite a few educators that were interviewed for this project, and the through line was the same. They felt the need to have to teach black children black history because it wasn't a requirement. And especially when the schools were segregated here in Atlantic City, a lot of them talked about how they were intentionally teaching kids about their history so that they would know. So education is key, and we even see what's going on in this day and age in Florida and in this country, and the efforts to try to stop very critical history in this country from being taught. So education is key. So I'm going to toss to Malika now. You can only imagine the conversations they have at home, right? So, Malika, what sorts of discussions were there in your home regarding this topic prior to and after this project? Because I know y'all had some good convos. And how did participating in this project change your discussions of race and racism, if at all?
I'll say discussions at home have extended far back to my childhood. This isn't new. We would always go back and forth debating on different things. However, when I got to college and I started my Africana Studies, I began to open up, and I started to understand some of the things that my father would say that I wasn't getting when I was in high school, because it was very Eurocentric history that we were being taught. In fact, one of my history teachers in high school, Egg Harbor Township High School, he was teaching a history lesson, and he said that slavery wasn't that bad, and that, in fact, slaves had retirement plans where they would get retired and they wouldn't have to work anymore. And they're teaching this to the kids, and I was sitting there like, okay, this is something to teach the children. And when I got to college and I just started my studies in the Africana Studies program, I just had my mind just blew, because I was opened up to a plethora of information that has been withheld from me. I felt like it was being withheld, because when you have information like that, they say knowledge is power, and getting that information, I felt empowered as a Black person. I felt even more proud to be Black, because when you are raised in a predominantly white area, you're taught to kind of like hide yourself. You're taught to kind of assimilate, to belong. But after going to college and getting the Africana Studies history taught to me, it equipped me with the knowledge that would make it more easy for me to live authentically in my Blackness, one, and two, when it comes to different conversations that would get brought up both at home and beyond, I would have the information and the tools to, go back and forth with them. I would say that this project hasn't really changed our conversations. It hasn't, but we have had many a debate, and we will continue to have many of debates about varying things, but I'm very grateful for some of the lessons that he has taught me when I was a child, that I now see what is going on, and I'm grateful to have that information now. So,
Sometimes the lesson is just in the dialogue, right? You're learning from each other. And it's funny, I had a similar experience in Egg Harbor Township. I actually did not care for history because of what we were being taught. And then I ended up going to Howard University. I'm like, I love history. So, and I'm actually studying history now, getting another degree. So those...
It's propaganda. Like K-12 education is propaganda. Sorry, but it is. Right? And then you go to Howard and you get to look at things in different ways, right? Or college in general, but I feel like a lot of education is propaganda. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, the issue I think really is just that we're not getting all sides of the story.
Yes.
And that's what it is. So when you finally get to learn these other happenings or this other history, now you have a more comprehensive understanding of the foundation of this country, or the policies of the world and all of these things. So, so thank you for sharing your experience. I'm going to toss back to Mr. Hunter. So, beginning of this project, we talked about a little earlier how it was all on Zoom, and we had some of those technological issues. And I actually remember a few times with you, Mr. Hunter, working through some technological issues. So, overcoming the digital divide and maintaining a sense of community was imperative during this project. So can you discuss any of the challenges that you overcame, and do you think it would have looked different the first time if we had it in person versus via Zoom?
Yeah. Well, I think that the project is working along really, really well. I'm really excited that Stockton took this on to become part of Atlantic City and its surroundings, to look back at the seniors and to get the information that they had stowed in their hope chests and their wallets and their walls and their scrapbooks. This information is hidden so many places. I'm just delighted that it came from those locations to the public. But one big thing that I wanted to really discuss today was that Atlantic City and its surroundings, the advent of redlining. Redlining was the crutch of what made me who I am today. And simply because when I arrived in Atlantic City, I saw this metropolis happening on the north side of town. It was called separate but equal. On the south side of town, let's say, for instance, they had a YMCA, but they had a white YMCA on the south side, and they had a black YMCA on the north side. The same thing occurred with the other organizations, such as the school districts. The school districts on the north side of town, when I say north side, from Arkansas to Connecticut Avenue, from Atlantic Avenue back to Venice Park, were considered a red line area for people of color. I don't care what shade of color you were, people of color lived in those areas. And it was really, really a critical time for African Americans to live through redlining, because the kids who lived in that area, there were three basic schools on the north side of town. There was the Indiana Avenue School, there was the New Jersey Avenue School, there was a little small north side school. And those schools were, kids who lived in that area were forced to go to those schools. They could not apply for schools in Margate, Ventnor, or Longport. They had to go to those schools that were separate but equal. And that was a sad time for people of color, not just in Atlantic City, but throughout the whole United States of America, redlining took place. But it was in particular exciting here because it was in front of us and it's something we had to live with. And if you ask yourself a question, was it separate but equal? Jim Crow laws working in Atlantic City, working in Camden, working in Trenton, New Jersey, and throughout the state of New Jersey? No, separate but equal did not work. It was a terrible thing. It was a terrible thing that was bestowed upon little black kids and people of color, that to only know that they're not going to see this white person until they got to high school, when the sending districts all sent all the kids to the Atlantic City High School or the schools in Camden or wherever throughout the state of New Jersey. It was at that point in time they had a chance to meet with people of different nationalities and to coexist with them, and the advent of learning. So when they got to those schools, what happened was what the brother on the end was saying. Now, you have no qualifications to be a doctor. You're going to be work on cars. You're going to be a printer. You're going to be a janitor, because they didn't know that person. But the teachers in the red line districts knew those students. Mr. Jordan knew his principal. He knew his teacher, and so did his bride. They knew exactly what was going on in these communities. But once they reached high school, it's a different ball of wax. It was really, really a sad day. And I'm sure Mr. Jordan and Mrs. Jordan, you can testify to that fact, that what happened after leaving Indiana and getting down to the junior high school and leaving junior high school going on, you really found separate but equal. So we at the African American Museum took advantage of this. There was a gentleman who wrote a book called The North Side, and he wrote another book called Boardwalk Empire. And when they did Boardwalk Empire, Nelson Johnson was a very, very distinguished judge here on the north side of town throughout Atlantic City. And he wrote these two books, and they were really, really did very well. The Boardwalk Empire went on to do great things. I was a consultant for Boardwalk Empire, and we ended up getting 19 Emmy Awards for that story about Chalky White and Nucky Johnson and what happened in the red line section of Atlantic City and throughout the county. It's really, really amazing to have the opportunity to be a historian, to be able to look you guys in the eye and say to you, history will repeat itself if you don't change it quickly. So if we dare not to change it, it's going to repeat itself. There's going to be another set of Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow laws and those things are happening throughout the United States. They're happening in the state of Florida, where my granddaughter teaches school, and I would send her every year the information about African-American history. And the last 4 years, she said, Dad, Pop, don't send it anymore because we can't teach that anymore. They're banning our books in our schools. So it's so very important to go out and get your school boards elected, people who are going to make sure that they don't purge the bookshelves in schools. And grateful that colleges are not doing that as of yet. But it could come a day that colleges will abandon programs such as we have here today. And so it's really, really dangerous. So we put this new exhibit together. It's called the Northside, redlining throughout the United States. And it's applicable to any city in the United States of America because it happened all over. If anyone in the audience would think for one moment, in 1937, in Atlantic City, we had 13 black doctors. Does anyone have any idea how many black doctors we have in that same red line district today?
None.
Zero. Zero. There's not one black doctor who practices in a traditional red line community. It took place right at, not one, okay? Not one, it's really, and at the same time, I beg to say this here, we had, those who were take a little sip every now. There were like 27 liquor licenses on the north side of Atlantic City. Houses of ill repute and things of that nature, gin mills. How many, like 27 to 30 out there were, how many do you think are there right now? If you know, shut up. But if you don't know, raise your hand. How many do you think are there right now today? On the red line section of Atlantic City, how many not liquor license, what are we talking about now?
You were talking about
Liquor license, okay. I'm jumping ahead of myself. How many we did the doctors first. How many liquor licenses do you think are left on the north side?
None.
How many do you think?
15.
Shut up.
No.
I was just guessing.
Okay, zero. There's not one liquor license left on the north side of Atlantic City, where there were some 30,000 people of color who patronized those businesses, and those liquor licenses that were on the north side of Atlantic City, those guys made sure that they sponsored baseball teams, basketball teams, little league teams, made sure that the Girl Scouts had a chance to, they put their money back in their community, so those dollars stayed there. But with the advent of that, so what then happened, they had number writers and gangsters, and all they called them gangsters, who wrote numbers. They had number bankers, the whole 9 yards, and it was really, really a terrible thing to write numbers back in those days. But those same number writers, the guys like Dick Austin, they sponsored making sure people had coal in their fire, made sure that the people had food to feed their children. But then they came in and locked those guys up and put them all in jail, right? So what business does the state of New Jersey and every other state in the United States go into? They go into the lottery business.
Yeah.
Put those guys in jail. Do you think those dollars come back to the community? And the answer is hell no.
I want to say something.
Go ahead.
The reason there is no liquor license on the north side now is the state of New Jersey has so many liquor licenses.
Tell the story.
They need those black liquor licenses to exist in the casinos. And the blacks made a mistake by selling their liquor license to the casino. And they didn't add the codicil to hire at least one black bartender. They hired no black bartenders from out of those establishments, and there was no black bartenders in the bars that had the black liquor license in the casinos. That's what happened to the black liquor license.
Bait and switch.
Yes.
True story, true story. Thank you, thank you.
I know, we got all this wisdom in the room. We could stay here all night just learning.
My problem is my father was a preacher. And they asked me why didn't I become a minister of the cloth and turn my collar around backwards. And I said I prefer being a historian.
And here you are, and so I think that was one of the benefits.
Here I'm preaching anyhow.
Of us going, right. I think that was one of the benefits of us going digital, right? Because you have this wealth of information, and you may have people who have not been to the museum, who have not learned this information, so now you have a wider net, right, that you can cast, a wider spread of information that you can benefit from, that the community can benefit from. And so thank you for all of that information, Mr. Stafford. Excuse me, Mr. Hunter. Thank you. So we only have a few more questions left. I want to leave some time at the end for our audience participants to ask questions or add more commentary, because again, we have such a wealth of knowledge in here today. So I'm going to throw this next question to Madison. What was the most surprising thing that you learned during this project?
Oh, wow, that's a really great question. I learned so many things from Taria. I think she talked about how there were unsaid rules in Atlantic City, and she used the words de facto segregation, and that was really interesting for me to learn about, how everybody in Atlantic City, it wasn't talked about, but everybody knew where to go. They knew where their communities were. It was sad to learn. You know, she said she felt very comfortable because of it, though, growing up in her community, but it was just really interesting to hear that from her. Yeah.
And had you heard that before and growing up in school?
No, I really didn't, and that's why I was so happy to hear about, I can't emphasize education enough, because growing up, it was very, I think Malika said, very Eurocentric, the education system that I grew up in, and it wasn't until I came to college that I was like, I don't know the half of it, and I still don't, even to this day, and I really had to take it upon myself to, take the classes that I was so grateful that Stockton offered, to be able to learn about all of these things. So to answer that question, no, it was never something that I had heard about before college.
Gotcha. Thank you. Ms. Marcus, at some point you had mentioned that you value being able to connect with the younger people. So can you just tell us a little bit about that? Why is that?
Couldn't get the candy. I like the young people because they listen. They ask the right questions, and they just let me talk. And I like talking if I know what I'm talking about. Because I talked about child abuse also during one session. And that's my main thing I like to talk about, is child abuse and domestic violence, because that's very, very important in the world. So that was basically it. Just they were relaxed. They were nice, and they just let me talk.
And you had a lot to share.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, you're pretty young at heart yourself. This woman could walk around the whole city and outwalk me any day.
She was already talking about walking home from here earlier.
But I think you said something key in just saying that, the younger folk listen. I think this is a different generation.
Right.
And this generation coming up under us is willing to listen. They're willing to learn. They're willing to get those history lessons that maybe their parents didn't. And so I'm so happy that you all got to connect, because clearly they're learning stuff that they're not learning in books or in school.
And I like to say oral history is probably the most accurate history, because I learned about my mother's side of the family, the Irish and the French, more than anything else, and she got that knowledge from her father. So when I got older, because kids were teasing us, and I wanted to know, what was up with them, my parents. I wanted to know certain things about their background. So I started questioning things at a young age. So she shared that information with me, and I did my whole tree on my maternal side way back. I put most of it on Facebook. And she didn't want to tell me about certain things, but I kept plucking her until she died. And then I just got all this knowledge in my head, and then I found the information, she was accurate what my grandfather shared with her. And my other relatives, I have a huge family on my maternal side, they didn't know maybe a third of what I know. I know like all of it on my maternal side. I mean, when I say all of it, I dug all the races and the mixtures and all that, and it was very deep. And it started from Ireland and in France, and then they intermarried with African Americans, Mexicans, blah, you know how it goes. But that was the root of the Hunter family and the Burrow family on my mother's side. My mother's surname was Hunter, okay? Hunter. He is related to me, but he doesn't want to be, okay? I told him that a long time ago. He doesn't want to be related to me, but he is, all right? He's probably like my third cousin. But, no, seriously, okay? I just haven't found it. But, so that knowledge was important to me because I wanted to know this, and this. And the properties that my parents on her side inherited, it came from slavery, and my family still owns that property, the plantation part in South Carolina. And it came from their own slaves, and it got passed down to my great-grandfather and my grandfather. So all that knowledge came to pass, and I had the wills and stuff. I had the wills of my second grandfather, great-grandfather, and I had the will of my grandfather. Right. So I wanted to know, and that part, I'm kind of grateful the kids kind of, bother us a little bit, because I would never have questioned my parents, especially my mother. My father was closed mouth. I know some stuff too, but I started questioning my mother because the kids made me question things about us.
Right.
So I started digging.
Right.
And I wanted to know everything, and I found out everything that I needed to know, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Right. I think it's so important that you talked about oral tradition, because many times, we don't honor oral tradition, but that was the primary tradition both in Africa and once we got here, and documents were intentionally burned, and so that has been a part of our history. So being able to pass that down now to students who can then go and tell the story is really important. I'm going to ask this last question again because I want to save some space for our audience members, and I want to acknowledge Councilman Shabazz before he leaves.
That was like a drop.
Oh, gotcha. He's coming back. But Mr. Stafford, you imparted so much knowledge, so much wisdom into the students that interviewed you, and to some of the audience members from our past events. I've, talked to people who've attended, and they talked about Mr. Stafford, he was preaching, So we know that people have gained a lot of information from you, but what did you gain from this project?
Well, I gained a lot. I came to Atlantic City in 1993, and on the suggestion of a brother in Baltimore, and I had left Baltimore in a very, very messed up situation. I was hooked on crack at the time, and I lost my first family. So when I came to Atlantic City, I saw a vibrant city. I saw a city by the ocean, the casinos. There were a lot of jobs. You used to look in the press newspaper and find a job one day. If you get fired from that, you go to the newspaper again, get a job the next day. But you can't find those jobs today. But Atlantic City proved to be the best move I ever made, because that's where I met my lovely wife, working at the court. And we produced two beautiful and strong young women in Malika and her sister Amira. The legacy of Atlantic City as far as leadership, I think Mayor Ushery had just gone through what he had gone through, and some of the turmoil that happened in the mayorship. I saw a need to get involved with the grassroots element here in Atlantic City. So in 1995, I joined the Nation of Islam. And that was the greatest move that I'd ever done. And it was another epiphany for me when I joined the Nation of Islam in 1995, because it opened up so many doors as far as being in the activist realm and being in the grassroots realm, dealing with all kinds of people in all walks of life. But I'll say this, that Atlantic City has tremendous potential, but it has not tapped into that potential, because I think, like I said earlier, you need to take control of the education of your children. Because if you do not do that, your children's going to wind up in a hell of a situation. As we said, the misguidance that goes on in the educational realm is something that's very, very real. As the sister down from me said, that she was denied the opportunity to do what she wanted to. I was denied the opportunity. And I had to go through what I had to go through to get to Atlantic City to find myself and find life. So I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. I thank you for allowing me to be on the board. And I want to thank Almighty God for saving my life so I can share this day with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We thank you, Mr. Stafford, for the gem that you are to this community. So before we have the mic passed around, we'll have someone from our team, if you're interested, if you have a question or some commentary you'd like to add, we'll have someone run the microphone to you. But I want to give Councilman Shabazz just a minute to say a few words since he's gracing us with his presence. This is another man that can outwalk me any day in dress shoes and a suit. Yes, pay attention to details. But another advocate for this community, truly.
Good afternoon. I tried to sneak in, but it didn't work. I hate to be late. The only reason that I am late, Mr. McWhorter, is because I was at Resorts for the Police Foundation Luncheon, which they honored Mark Giantonio, who is the president of Resorts, and some police officers who did some heroic things. And it's important for us to lift the police up, especially in this time when some people are misguided and want to use the phrase defund the police. We don't believe in that in Atlantic City. We believe they have the right to say that if they want to, but we don't believe that's the way to go to have a safe community. We believe that we should support the police, not support the police right or wrong, but support the police and inform them how they can have better relationships with the community. So that's why I'm late. Let me just say that this young lady is a superstar in Atlantic City. And I am so happy to have this intergenerational activity. It's very important. We have to make sure that people understand the connections, the history is so important. I don't want you to think I'm giving a political speech, but we have some people running for the highest office in this country who want to distort and make some of our history disappear for their own reasons, and we can't allow that to happen. We have to tell our history as it is, the good, the bad, the ugly, try to make it better, not make anyone feel slighted, but we can't distort history. We can't omit history. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm going to be here to the end, even though I'm late.
Thank you, Councilman. So are there any questions or comments that people would like to share, whether it's based on what you heard in the panel or just your experience with the intergenerational project in general?
Oh, there's a question back there.
Got a hand. The fabulous Mrs. Belinda Manning.
I just want to make two statements based on things I've heard today. One is, let us not forget, let us understand that de facto segregation exists in this country. It is a reality. It has not gone away. It exists. And if you don't believe that exists, look around the house of worship that you go to and observe if there is a diversity in that group. Look around wherever you go and understand that the isolation that we have in our communities really is de facto segregation. Even our schools now, when we talk about education, look at our schools. look at who's there and who's missing. Okay, so that's an issue that we have to continue to look at, and look at ourselves in terms of how do we change that, right? How do we change that? And I think it's gatherings like this that are both intergenerational and interracial and move across faiths. Okay? So these are the kinds of experiences that we want for ourselves and our children. And I forgot what the second thing was. But I absolutely have forgotten what the second thing. But if I think of it, I'll tell whoever runs into me later on what it was.
You can always take the mic back.
Right.
Jacob, we have one up front here. Right here.
Here you go.
Hi. I think I come from the Air Force and air traffic and those type of areas. The thing that amazed me when I first got stationed here was Beta Field. And I thought there was a big neglected, in fact, I landed there a couple of times, but I think it was a very neglected piece of history. And Dr. Forsythe, some more on the technical side. I look for engineers, programmers, and those things. And what bothers me more than anything, I've come to learn that you can't have something you can't see. So we don't have doctors and as many lawyers and scientists in our own, but we do have books and pictures that we can show children. I think that it's important that we have more. I remember when I came from the South, we were what were called migrant farm workers. We lived in a place called Pompano, Florida, in a farm labor camp. We weren't allowed to go to the stores. And we traveled up the East Coast to Salisbury, Maryland, where we all encamped. And we picked hoed the fields. I'll be careful when I say hoe. We hoed the fields and picked the crop. And the last thing we did was sack the potatoes, and then we head back down south. But when I joined the Air Force, when I got into the United States Air Force, it opened my eyes up to many things. Because when I first came to Atlantic City at the age of 16, the people here didn't accept me. They called me a boat boy. That's right. And they chased me until I got tired of being run, till I was 17, and I ran into the United States Air Force. And through my career, through the Air Force, air traffic, even a stunt on the police department, brought my history back to this place, where I met my lovely wife, Gloria. All right. You back there, honey? Hey, Gloria.
But do me one favor, please, while you're talking. Would you tell them who Dr. Forsythe was?
That's where I was heading. Okay. That's what I wanted to talk about. Dr. Forsythe, back in the days of time, it was a point in time when there was a belief before the Tuskegee Airmen, just during that period, that there was a belief that we couldn't fly aircraft. We was already crop dusting. However, Dr. Forsythe and his partner took off here at Beta Field, which was the first named airport in the United States of America. They took off from here to California, to LA. Well, not actually LA, but we'll say LA. It was close enough. However, when they flew across to prove that they could fly this distance, the Negroes at that time, I think it was called Color Sin, heard about it on their trip back. And it is written that everywhere they landed for fuel, there was throngs of colors waiting to greet him until they got back home here. And those kinds of things that the children could see Dr. Forsythe, that we can fly an aircraft. There's a lot of things that we was designed for trash. And it reminds me of my lady friend here, when I looked over my history of McWhorter, I can only go back to Chiefland, Florida, 1864. because before that period of time, I know not what my name was. That's the point when I was given a name. So I can only go back to there. But as far as this country is concerned, it's provided me with a tremendous encouragement and joy being in this country, because I didn't know what it was. Because being called a nigger and biscuit lips and all these things, when I got in the military and at the Pentagon and working throughout all these systems, I found out how great this country really is. And what it is that people don't want us as so-called colored people or whatever we call today. They don't want us to be proud of this country. Now, my spiritual life said, a pride for hard precedes a for hardy fall. But they don't want us to be proud of this country. They want us to be adversarial. We have nothing to point for, but we have great things to point for. That we're loyal. We was thrown for trash. We've been in every department in our country, proving our fact that we can do these things. That's why I went in the Air Force. When they picked me up in the Air National Guard in '64, they allowed 4 of us to join the Air National Guard. 177 Tactical Fighter Group at Tech Center. 4 of us. There's only 2 of us alive right now. That's Newton Brown and myself. Barry Peterson went to the Coast Guard. It was segregated also during that period of time. But I just want to be encouraged, because when I went to Ohio State for my grandson's graduation, and I believe that segregation is a dying thing. My grandson would look at them girls, didn't care what color they were. That these girls didn't care what color he was. So it's my age of people that when my children die and I die, I think that all this racism and all this stuff is going to die with it. I think it's being fueled by people that are making funds on racism and not actually being where it's heading today. Because these children are not our cousins, these children don't care what color they are, they're having babies by, it'll be a guess who's coming home for dinner.
I'm sorry, I was supposed to be at work, and I could see Mike back to looking like, okay, my security's talking. And she's supposed to be over there. But when I heard this discussion, I had to get up and sit down and say, I like the storyline, which is a story of Atlantic City. So I am from Atlantic City. I grew up in the worst part of Atlantic City. I grew up, they call it Back Berlin. That's where I grew. And you know, some people, when I had finally moved from there and I moved to Pleasantville and I raised my children, they said, oh, well, you're from Back Maryland, your kids is gonna be this and that. I look at my kids today. I got one working at Cooper Hospital, one working at Summers Point Hospital. Sometimes I sit out here, I see my daughter driving New Jersey Transit. So I say, it ain't where you're from, it's where you're at. You know what I mean? And it was a time when I first moved, a young lady had got murdered, Back Maryland. Now, my daughter gets off work. She lives in her house, because I told them at 18, you gotta go. And I told them this ain't no revolving door, and I have 3 daughters, 2 sons. This ain't no revolving door. When you leave, deuces, what they say, deuces, don't come back. And my daughter was home. She just got off work, I was home. I look up, my house is surrounded by SWAT. They closed the whole Marbury Street down in Pleasantville. I'm like, and I'm getting ready for church. I'm going to Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, and I'm getting ready. I said, what's going on? We're looking for your daughter. You're looking for my daughter? At that same time they was doing that, they was already at my daughter's house with machine guns and pistols in my child's face. Now, mind you, my daughter just got finished dropping her bus off. And that's why I say, you know, there was, not to skip the subject, there was a young lady, oh my gosh, she's my best friend, she is a white girl, and she calls me all the time, and And we talked about it the other day. She said, they call me Peanut. I'm gonna never forget what you told me in 3rd grade. I said, what was that? Oh, you told me, why do y'all call us colored? And she said, you said to me, I said, what did I say? She said that I said, Jessica, if I hit you in your face gonna turn pink, purple, yellow. But if you punch me in my face, I'm gonna turn the same color, black. I said, I did? What the crap? She said, you was trying to explain to me, y'all call us colored. She said, and I'm a white girl, but we're colored. I said, oh my God, where did I get that from? I said, I know my mother didn't tell me that. But I'm just saying, you know, we go through all this and all that, and we go through racism. We live through racism. It's going to always be that way until the time has come to a point. I say we have good, we have bad, and we have in between. So what I'm saying is, like today, where we sitting, this was a black project. Where you're sitting where this panel table's at, this was called Pitney Village. This was a project for black low-income people. So a lot of things I told people, stop saying because I came from back Maryland, we're bad, we're this, we're that. I said, I had guns drawn in my daughter's face because they said my daughter had something to do with a murder that happened in those projects. Here, my daughters are doing their thing, driving buses, working in hospital, nurses, but it was all because of this here, my skin color that happened, and it shouldn't happen. And yes, me as a mother, I went to Lansing Police Department. Yes, I raised Cain. Because when they brought my daughter in, she had no shoes on. This was in the middle of winter. She had no shoes. She had on a t-shirt and some shorts. And I told the police, if my daughter sneezes, I'm having this whole police department shut down. They actually called Pleasantville Police, went to my daughter's house, and they got her some clothes. And that's why I say it's, you know, some things, the stories. I just say the stories of Atlantic City. I have done my part in Atlantic City for a lot of years. I worked for Trump for, 15 years? So I did my time, I did my part. I no longer live in Atlantic City, and it wasn't because of where I came from. Well, yeah. Let me think. Wait, give me a moment to think. It do have some point where I came from because of the violence, but we can't judge everybody from where you come from. They judged me at that time. And I say, y'all cannot judge me because me and my children came from back Maryland. We came from the roughest, the toughest neighborhood. But I look at my daughters today and I said, okay, one works at Cooper, they all nurses, one drives a bus. You can't judge. And I heard the two girls in Wawa talking, and that's what kind of like made me upset. Because they were talking, oh, she might have done it. She came from back Maryland. And I had stopped the young ladies. I said, let me explain something to you. Yes, my kids came from back Maryland. Yes, we did. You don't have to be the way they are to present yourself as a different person. And because we came from there, that don't mean we have to be gun-toting and stop judging my family. I said, girl, and I said, this was my sister, girlfriend, you take a look at my daughters. They make more money twice than I do. And I'm a security. And that's how I say people need to stop judging on where you come from. That goes with police department, that goes with any department, because we are being judged by where we come from. Because you never know, that person can be the next councilman, the next mayor. Absolutely. Because that person can come from Pitney Village, Stanley Homes, back Maryland. But this is how I tell people, stop judging us on where we come from. I do come from Back Maryland, the worst is the toughest neighborhood. But you see where I'm at, you see where my children are at. And my grandson, he's on his way to Duke University. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have a few more moments, and I know there were two hands in the back. Ms. Manning, did you still have something to say? Okay, and then there was one more. I think it was Ms. Ida Jones. Yes. We'll end with Ms. Ida Jones.
Okay. This goes back to the question about Zoom. And I just want to focus a little bit of attention on the fact that technology and the use of technology for communication, for promotion, for marketing, and just basic interface between human beings, it's not going anywhere. No matter how hard we want it to stop, no matter how disruptive we think it is to human interaction, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
And the challenge is, how do we exploit it to our advantage? Because that is what is happening nationwide. There are those who know the importance of mastering the technology. It's not that hard, folks. And it's important that we learn to do that and that we learn to use it to our advantage.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Manning. And Ms. Ida Jones, you're going to wrap us up.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The one thing that I do living history. I do women of color from 1820 to 1920. As long as we orally share the history of this country, blacks and whites together, because we built this country together. And as long as they say, as long as we know where we came from, we'll know where we're going. And I pride myself in the fact that we do storytellings, plays, movies, living history all over the country. And the purpose, as one of the few women of color that do it, is so that when panels get together like this, they can relate to seeing the actual person on a stage. And I say this in conclusion. I was at one of the charter schools doing a living history program. A few months later, I was in CVS, and little girl said, "Mommy, that's a slave lady. That's a slave." And her mother became so upset. She said, no, baby, don't say that. I said, yes. The fact that she remembered what I told her about her ancestors, no matter how I look today, that made me feel good, that she knew the story of what a black woman lived through, and she could remember it. I don't know where she's at today, but if each one reaches one, and if each one teaches one, then everybody will know. And that's what's important. All these projects that we're doing is wonderful, and I think it's great. And as long as we continue to share, I was working the polls last week, and one young lady said to me, "We don't get a chance to sit around with your generation," she's 33, "and interact and learn things that will benefit us as we go forward." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. I'm going to have Dr. Morris come back up in just a second, but I want to acknowledge Dean Ian Marshall, who's joining us today. He is the new Dean of Arts and Humanities at Stockton University, and he has been a huge support for this project and Stories of Atlantic City. So thank you so much for coming. Do you want to share any words? No? Okay. All right, thank you again. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Morris.
Thank you. Whoops. Thank you, Christina. She is so amazing. We are so lucky. that Christina worked for us with Stories of AC and that she continues to give us her time. We're very lucky. So I have a few announcements. The first is when we finish up here, please make sure that you get your gifts, which are back in the other room. There are blankets for each of you from Stories of Atlantic City, as well as our little takeaway zines. Please make sure that if you are already full, if you've already eaten your full, we have Tupperwares and plastics so you can take some stuff home with you, because we, can't eat it all. So please make sure, you eat everything you can and then make a Tupperware to go. I also want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, you can do a mini interview with Jacob. You make sure you pick up your zines, take your Polaroids, and see Mr. Hunter's Museum, if you've not seen Mr. Hunter's Museum. And now, and did you still have them sign in? Did Beyonce want folks to sign in? Okay, I don't know, but okay. Now, my last announcement, the last thing you'll hear from me before I turn it over to Professor Rosenthal, our last round of prizes. Beyonce, do you want to grab the prizes? Okay.
She's grabbing. Emily has a word.
Sorry, go ahead, hon.
I just want to say one thing. I know a lot of older people, not anybody in this room, but the older generation, I feel like, talks very negatively about young people. So it's very refreshing to hear stories, especially perspectives from older people that have faith in young people and have faith in the upcoming generation. Because I really think that's the only way that we're going to get anywhere and change anything, is if we're encouraging young people and not talking in a negative light about them. So it's very refreshing. Mr. McWhorter, you said, you said something about how you're you have a lot of faith in young people and what we're going to do, and that's good for us to hear, because that's encouraging, and that's a lot of what this project has taught me. It was very refreshing to hear that kind of perspective, rather than a lot of people these young kids today, we don't want to hear that, So thank you for all of you here that speak highly of us. It really is encouraging, and it makes us want to do good things. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Em. Yes, and thank you, everybody, for being so willing to share today and in your interviews. And again, I hope we've made you guys proud of how we've represented you, because it's important to us. Now, our last round of prizes. And if you're not here, you don't get to win, so don't worry. Okay, all right, what do we got first? Okay, the big one, 1,373. Oh yeah, and guess, okay, we'll see. We have, is Hermione still here? Hermione, 1,428 was Hermione's guess. And the next person on the list was Constance, by the way. She was the next closest. But Hermione, please come and get a gift. Hermione is a graduate student at Stockton, and she's an exchange student who is with us from Greece. So it's lovely to have her, and she gets to take home prizes. Either basket. You get the whole thing, babe. Oh, okay. Yeah, share with your friends. Yeah. Yeah. Yay! Okay. Yep, there's a scarf, there's a shirt, there's a stuffy, there's all kinds, there's candle and candy. Beyonce put the lovely baskets together. Now, number 2. Jar number 2 has 727 fuzzy balls. Now, if he's not still here, he's not going to win, but the person who came closest with 744 was Mr. Ralph Hunter. Is Mr. Ralph Hunter still here? Mr. Hunter, if you want if he doesn't answer, it's going to go to the next one. All right. Mr. Hunter, come get your gift. Yeah. Then I don't want to bother him. Obviously, that's not him. Okay. Woo. And I think to close out the planned portion is Professor Rosenthal. I'll step aside. I wish there were more prizes to give to all of you, because you are all the prize to us. Yeah.
Okay, let's also take one moment again to applaud our panel, the Christinas, Morris, and Noble, everyone on the panel, everyone for coming. Thank you. Thank you all for coming too. I know this was a wonderful, wonderful day together. Thank you for spending that time as well. I imagine too, you're thinking, what is next? What is happening next for Stories of Atlantic City, and how can we continue to be involved? Well, please, if you have not already, please be sure to add your name to our list. Follow us on social media. If you have a smartphone, we can also support you with finding us there. Christina Noble and I are really good at helping folks do that too. And we have a website too, which you can find as well. And you'll find all of these projects there also. So in the upcoming holiday season, as you're with family and friends, hey, I heard about this thing, someone can put it into Google. Oh, here we go, thank you. StoriesofAtlanticCity.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and our Twitter. Since I never really loved Twitter, and now, as my students know, I just call it X, as in literally, figuratively, no. So we don't really love Twitter, so forget Twitter, but the other two we love and we use. Okay, we also want to take a moment now, again, to express our sincere gratitude for all who have come together to help make today possible. We have been planning this since the summer, and it's amazing how this project has come together. And of course, really since 2020, we've been all working together too. So first of all, thanks to everyone for being here. Thank you also to Michael Cagno and the Noise Museum for hosting, and especially Sarah Lacey. Sarah, her event planning and expertise have been amazing. Every detail, everything. Sarah, we love you. We thank you. Sarah. Okay, of course, thanks to our Stories of Atlantic City team, Jacob Wolos, Emily Montgomery, Jillian France, and especially big thank you to event team leader, Beyonce Tyus, who did an amazing job. Beyonce, if I'm trying to dance for you, can you see me do, it's the full Toby, like we're doing it, okay. Thanks also to our friends at SCOSA and Stockton's Office of Community Engagement. Special thanks to our special friend Trish Collins. Trish, thank you so much for your help planning this event. With the City of Atlantic City, all of our continued friends, especially Christina Noble, Mr. Brian Gunther, thank you, thank you, thank you. Stockton University School of Arts and Humanities, Dean Marshall, Michelle Wismer, I'm doing my dance, the whole RHU office too, Stockton Productions and ITS, thank you friends, Graphics and Printing, and also again for our panelists, Mr. Ralph Hunter, Ms. Valeria Marcus, Mr. Michael Stafford, Malika Stafford, Maddie McDaniel, Emily Montgomery. Thank you for all of our participants who have come, past, present, God willing, future, right? And we invite you to stay, to mingle. We have bags so you can take home the leftovers. You know how Stories of AC likes to send people with things. Don't forget your Stories of AC swag, as we call it, and we hope to see you again soon. We love you and thank you.
Thank you.